Hello beautiful people of the internet and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be trying something new, doing something a little different. I've never done anything like this before, but I'm going to hopefully turn it into a series if this video does well. This is a starter pack video for the Sasscore genre. So basically the way this is going to work is I have picked 6 albums that I think accurately represent the different sides to this genre, and that's what the starter pack series is going to be. I'll pick 6 albums to talk about within a certain genre, and hopefully I can get people into a lot of different types of music. Now, before the video starts, I want to real quick do a little bit of self-promotion here. I recently started a little bit of a little podcast with my cousin, just for fun. You know, we're not professionals. We're not trying to do something really crazy here. It's just a little fun thing we're doing. It's called the Lilo and Henno podcast. Check that out in the description of this video. We just released the second episode of it today, and yeah, hope you guys enjoy that. So without further ado, let's get into the starter pack. Here we go. Sasscore, or just Sass for short, is a subgenre of punk music that emerged in the late 1990s, which is known, as you may have guessed, for having extremely sassy vocals and oftentimes satirical and even erotic lyrics, but not in a sexy way, usually just in a weird, bizarre, disturbing way. The genre is also known for taking influence from various genres outside of punk and hardcore, oftentimes adding danceable beats to their songs inspired by new wave or disco. Most sources I've come across say that Sasscore was mainly invented as a reaction to the hypermasculinity of the general hardcore scene of the 90s. However, the way I see it is that emo and screamo were already invented to rebel against that masculinity by being more sensitive and emotional, and sass was invented as a way to almost mock and criticize that masculinity by being as flamboyant and spastic as possible. From what I can tell, Sasscore grew out of the late 90s screamo scene in a style appropriately called sassy screamo. The best example of this would be the band Orchid, whose third and final album took their very chaotic and violent sound and added in some stylistic nuances as well as a more sassy sound. So if you want to hear the roots of the genre, I would check that out. But the bands and albums I'm going to be talking about today came out once sass had kind of transcended the screamo genre and become its own thing. Over the years, sass has been combined with various genres from indie rock to no wave to grindcore, and it's gotten to the point where sasscore is no longer one defined sound, but rather more of an aesthetic. I've picked 6 albums today that I think do a good job of capturing the many sides of this genre. The genre is certainly not for everyone, and depending on your personal taste, you might listen to some of the stuff I'm recommending and think, how the fuck could anyone ever listen to that? But hopefully, if you're into weird, crazy, out there music, I will have piqued your curiosity by the end of this video and maybe made you want to explore this highly underrated genre. So yeah, enjoy. It might be worth mentioning that the first 3 albums on this list all happen to be from the year 2003, the first of which is one of my favorite albums of all time, Burn Piano Island Burn by the Blood Brothers. The Blood Brothers are one of the more well-known acts of the Sasscore genre and are often brought up in post-hardcore conversations as well, alongside bands such as At the Drive-In and Glassjaw. They're known for having 2 vocalists as well as a manic and chaotic sound which takes some obvious influence from the aforementioned late 90s screamo scene, as well as noise rock, dance punk, and various other genres. Their third album, Burn Piano Island Burn, is one of their more well-known and popular releases, and it's not hard to see why. The band really keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout this record's 47-minute runtime. It's packed with bangers from front to back, such as Fucking's Greatest Hits and Ambulance vs. Ambulance, which are surprisingly catchy despite being as freaky and inaccessible as they are. The angular guitar riffs, groovy bass lines and drumming, flamboyant singing, and throat-shredding screams of these songs evoke the feeling of being completely shit-faced and dancing at a party, but the house that the party is in is on fire. This album has a lot more to offer than just energy and chaos. More artsy tracks such as Every Breath is a Bomb and Cecilia and the Silhouette Saloon almost reach prog territory in the way that they switch between moments of harsh noise and intensity as well as softer, gloomier, but equally as disturbing keyboard passages. And speaking of disturbing, I can't not mention the cryptic and at times horrifying lyrics of these tracks. Some of them sort of make sense, such as God Bless You Bloodthirsty Zeppelins, whose lyrics seem to be a criticism of gender roles and more specifically the treatment of women in society. And then others just make no sense and are absolutely hilarious to read, such as the title track. Soured palm trees sputter waxy wax stink, burn Piano Island burn. Boiling lagoons chewing bubblegum pink, burn Piano Island burn. The Vicodin volcano spews and salivates, burn Piano Island burn. Its belly bloated like a preteen pregnancy, burn Piano Island burn. So yeah, that should give you a general idea of how some of these lyrics sound. If you are a fan of post-hardcore, particularly of an experimental or progressive nature, this would probably be a good entry point into Sasscore for you. Our next 2003 album is the self-titled debut album by the band Black Eyes. In my opinion, no band on this list is quite as odd as Black Eyes. And the thing about them is that they're not particularly loud or fast, they're just odd. Musically, they are in this weird uncanny valley where they sound obscure, yet strangely familiar. The drumming is pretty straightforward, and the bass typically plays some funky post-punk inspired grooves, but what makes this album so strange is mainly the guitar and vocals. The guitar rarely plays anything particularly melodic, but instead plays around with feedback and dissonance, which really gives this record a noise, or even like a no-wave type of edge. And the vocals in this band are by far the most sarcastic sounding vocals of any Sasscore band I've ever heard, to the point where they just sound really pissed off. While there are occasional screams on this album, most of the lyrics are just spoken in that sassy, sarcastic tone I was talking about. It's almost like a slam poetry session on top of weird-ass music. And even the occasional screams are more like weak, raspy yelping, almost like they're trying to make fun of the aggression and hypermasculinity of a lot of the vocalists of rock and metal bands at the time. And they sort of expand on this idea lyrically on the second track, A Pack of Wolves, where the pack of wolves in question is a metaphor for the angry groups of men who display a lot of toxic masculinity, specifically in music. And that's not the only song on the album that deals with social issues. In fact, just about every song on the album does. The opening track, Someone Has His Fingers Broken, is about the shit that gay people have to go through just for being themselves, saying how whether you're in the deserts of the Middle East or in the cities of the United States, people will hate you and attack you for who you love no matter what. On the sacred side makes several direct references to slavery, Speaking in Tongues criticizes the use of slurs in a casual sense, and King's Dominion is about the harmfulness of gender roles in the household. Deformative, one of my favorite tracks on the album, is a bit more metaphorical when it comes to lyrics, but upon closer inspection, it seems to be sung from the perspective of a victim of pedophilia. Sunset behind a chain link fence, you put that tiny candle in my hand, you put that chrism on my forehead, with your fingers crossed, you held my wrists numb, and I'll never forget that pebble pushing up into my knee. It gets more disturbing the more you think about it. If you're into weird experimental music, socially aware lyrics, or both, this album could definitely be a good way to get into Sasscore. And the last album on our list from 2003 is Plague Soundscapes by the Locust. Right off the bat, it is worth noting that this is the only album I've ever listened to where the number of tracks on it is greater than its duration in minutes. There's 22 tracks, and the album is 21 minutes long. So that should give you a good idea of what we're dealing with here. That's right, this is some sassy grindcore, sometimes referred to as sass grind. The first couple of tracks give you a good introduction to the general sound of this album. Short songs, mostly under a minute long, relentless blast beats, dissonant guitars, and a noisy bass line. But despite being as loud and as fast as it is, I wouldn't really describe it as heavy or punishing like most grindcore albums are. The guitars are distorted, but they're not particularly thick or crushing in tone. The focus here isn't on how menacing and destructive can we make this sound, it's how chaotic and insane can we make this sound. But perhaps the most notable qualities about this band are the vocals, which constantly switch between frantic screams and sassy singing, as well as the prominent use of a synthesizer, which gives this entire album a very sci-fi feeling. And on the topic of sci-fi, can I just say how much I love this album cover? It's some kind of lizard monster with a penis-looking head, fighting a headless blue giant in the middle of a ruined city, where all of the people have turned into zombies. It looks like an apocalypse, and it perfectly conveys the feeling of the music. Most of the tracks on this album follow a similar formula, but there are little nuances here and there that really tie the whole album together. For example, track number 5, Earwax Halo Manufactured for the Champion in All of Us, will randomly break in the middle of it and do this weird kind of build-up thing where the drums constantly get faster and there's weird whispering over the instrumental, or the track right after it, Wet Dream War Machine, which features a cryptic dark ambient section in its second half. We actually get a full track of the band experimenting with weird noises and atmospheres later on the album. I'm referring to track 18, Can We Please Get Another Nail in the Coffin of Culture Theft? Yes, these really are the titles of these songs. Really the best way to describe this album is if you took the Blood Brothers and just gave them every single drug that has ever existed and told them to write a record. If you are a fan of loud, noisy, chaotic music that makes you feel like you're going insane, this album could definitely be for you. Moving on to our next album, we have the debut full-length LP from the band These Arms Are Snakes, which is titled Oxeneers or the Lion Sleeps When Its Antelope Go Home, from 2004. I don't know what it was, but in the early 2000s, for some reason, all sorts of bands within the family of punk and hardcore genres, be it emo, or grindcore, or metalcore, or post-hardcore, started making the longest and most ridiculous album and song titles I've ever heard. I have no idea why. Anyway, this album is probably the most accessible record on this list. It doesn't have the freaky musical experimentation of Black Eyes, nor does it have the wild, chaotic instrumentals and harsh screams of the Blood Brothers or the Locust. The vocals on this thing are sort of like a less intense but more sassy version of the vocals in At the Drive-In. They're sort of in between singing and shouting for the most part, and the only time you get any screams is a little bit in the second track, Angela's Secret. There are undertones of math rock and progressive rock all over this record, with slight switches in time signatures as well as synthesizers and technical guitar leads. The opening track, The Shit Sisters, opens up with some weird electronic noises before the drums kick in, followed by the main riff of the song, played first on acoustic guitar before the electric guitar and vocals come in. It's kind of a banger. It's also worth mentioning that the chorus features a kick-ass guitar melody with some very cool psychedelic reverb effects that get further explored later on the album. The aforementioned Angela's Secret features an awesome synthy bass lead and an odd drum groove. The guitar really shines on this track as well, playing some of the most proggy melodies on the whole album. The 8-minute track, Gadget Arms, falls right in the middle of the record, and this song is the pinnacle of the psychedelic experimentation of this band. The guitars create this fuzzy, almost shoegazy soundscape, and are accompanied by a slow and steady drum beat. And the band also makes use of strange guitar noise to add to the trippiness of this track. It all kind of builds up, adding more and more elements as the song goes on. If you aren't really into hardcore or post-hardcore, but you're more of a general fan of rock music, then I think you would really enjoy this album, and it could be a good way to ease you into the Sasscore genre. Jumping ahead to 2006, we have the next album on our list, Hell Songs by Daughters. If you've spent any time in the music nerd section of the internet, there's no doubt you've heard the name Daughters before, most likely for their critically acclaimed 2018 comeback album, You Won't Get What You Want, an album that combines elements of noise rock, industrial rock, and post-punk. It's an amazing record, and if I ever do a starter pack on noise rock, that album will definitely be on it. But before Daughters were noise rock legends, they were actually a Sasscore band in the early to mid-2000s. This album, Hell Songs, sees them at an interesting point in their career, as it succeeds their 2003 debut, which features a very mathy sass grind sound, similar to the Locust, but it precedes their 2010 self-titled record, which would see them going further in a noise rock direction. As a result, Hell Songs contains elements of both of these sounds, making it one of the most unique sass albums I've ever heard. The band puts their weird foot forward with the album's first track, Daughters Spelled Wrong, which features a slow, mind-numbing no-wave instrumental created by dissonance, swirling guitars, and more than enough feedback, over which the singer goes on and on about bad things he's been known as. I will say, of all the bands on this list, it's between the Blood Brothers and Daughters for who has the most unique and recognizable vocals, with the former sounding like a child throwing a tantrum and the latter sounding like a very drunk Elvis. Yeah, I've been called a sinner. The rest of the album has a similar aesthetic, but most songs are a lot faster and more intense. There are crazy mathcore polyrhythms and dissonant guitar leads that sometimes sound like fire alarms. There are occasionally even blast beats that add to the erratic quality of the music, but once again, like The Locust, I wouldn't really describe this as a very heavy album, more like just weird and chaotic. This is due in part to a very particular guitar tone that has become associated with Daughters. You can hear it on all of their albums. It's not very distorted, but rather it feels sort of strained, and the way it's played on this album evokes the feeling of some kind of demented funhouse ride, especially on the opening riff of the track recorded inside a pyramid, which is in my opinion the catchiest and most memorable part of this album. The penultimate track, Cheers Pricks, also stands out due to the fact that it is 6 minutes long, whereas the rest of the tracks on the album are usually between 1 and 3 minutes. This band spends most of those 6 minutes playing their brand of mathy Sasscore, but ends the song with a long ambient section. There's no doubt that this and Black Eyes are the two weirdest albums on this list, and in fact, I think that this is weirder due to the disorienting quality that it creates in your ears. So if that sounds at all appealing to you, or if you're a fan of Daughter's later and more well-known work, be sure to check this album out. And last but not least, we're going to jump all the way to 2009 to check out a more recent album in the Sasscore genre, Songs for the Firing Squad by SeeYouSpaceCowboy. Now, let me just get this out of the way and say that this band means a lot to me. Their singer, Connie Scarbosa, is a trans woman and a huge inspiration to me both as an artist and as a person, and I don't know if I'd be here right now making a video for all the world to see while wearing a crop top if it wasn't for her. But regardless of that, this is just a really fucking good record. At 18 minutes in length, this is the shortest album on this list, and not a single song on it exceeds the 2-minute mark. I guess if you're a fan of early metalcore and mathcore bands like Dillinger Escape Plan and Converge, this would be a good place to start with Sasscore, since this album is really just as much of a mathcore album as it is a Sasscore album. In fact, that's how I found this band. Back when I was just getting into bands like Converge, I was looking for more mathcore to check out, and I found this record. However, one immediately noticeable difference between this album and other mathcore albums is that the band is clearly trying to have fun. They're not out here making Jane Doe and trying to change the landscape of hardcore. They're here to give us hectic guitar riffs, more than plenty of breakdowns, flamboyant sassy singing, and visceral screaming, all packaged up into 1-minute songs with titles like An Introduction for People Who Hate Introductions, Pep Talk from a Nihilist, and my personal favorite, You Don't Understand, the liquor is calling the shots now, Randy Bobandy. You know, these titles might also be long and annoying, but at least they're funny. Songs like Self-Help Specialist Ends Own Life follow a pretty basic structure. Intro riff, verse, a breakdown fit for only the most intensive mosh pits, and a sassy outro, while other tracks such as Jimmy Buffett Doesn't Even Surf jump from one section to the next with absolutely no rhyme or reason. Some of my favorite parts are when the band really wears their sense of humor on their sleeve, such as the quirky and awkward ending of Stop Calling Us Screamo, or the cute little indie rock section smack dab in the middle of fashion statements of the socially aware. If you're into heavy music, but you also don't take your music taste super seriously, I think you'll have a lot of fun listening to this record. So yeah, hopefully some of those albums sound interesting to you, and maybe you'll want to check them out. Maybe you'll want to get more into Sasscore. That'd be awesome. That's the goal with this video, is to get people into Sasscore. And be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you are new. It really means a lot. If you want to see more videos like this, or if you want to check out some of my album reviews, please be sure to subscribe, ring the notifications bell so you don't miss a video, and comment down below what genres you want to see me do a starter pack for next. I got a few planned, but you know, I'm open to anything. And if there's a genre I don't really know anything about, maybe I could get into it and then do a video about it. Just let me know what you want to see me do a starter pack for. And that will be just about it for this video. Yeah, bye!